a new study that linked BPA exposure to benign brain tumors. Now, these brain tumors are actually more prevalent among women who have too much exposure to BPA. Now, this study was done by Chinese researchers, and there are some drawbacks to the study.
Yes, some caveats to this study.
There are caveats. Now, they did this study by using urine samples, and the researchers determined BPA exposure levels from a single urine sample. Since the body quickly excretes BPA, a sample taken after a tumor has already developed does not necessarily indicate that exposure to the chemical predated the illness. So that is the caveat to it. What they did is they tested the urine sample. Those who had the highest BPA in their urine tended to have the
higher incidence of these particular benign brain tumors. A little bit of background on BPA. It's bisphenol A, and it is a plastics additive that makes plastics curvy and malleable. It's on the lining of almost every single aluminum can in the United States. It's used in plastic water bottles to give them that nice curvy structure, and it leaches into foods. We know this is well established. It's also well established that approximately 93% of Americans have elevated levels of BPA, bisphenol A, in their blood, and it has been linked. It hasn't been studied quite as extensively as it should have been before it was put into our food supply via packaging. But we have studies right now that show that it has been linked because it mimics the hormone estrogen. BPA mimics the hormone estrogen. So studies have shown that in the lab that it can change the sex, or is correlated with changing the sex of amphibians like frogs. It's also been correlated with reproductive abnormalities in little boys in fetal exposure.
One of the things that I came across when I was reading about this topic is that young girls as young as 8 years old are basically going through puberty, and one of the reasons why is because of too much exposure to this. At least it's one of the factors that researchers are looking into extensively right now.
Because there's a high correlation that they're seeing.
Because it does mimic estrogen.
Yes, it does.
So that's why it's not too far-fetched to think that BPA is the cause of that. Now, before we get more into this topic, I want to go to a video where they talk about the effects of BPA exposure and what it does to the human body. Let's watch.
In animal studies, exposure to BPA has been linked to birth defects. In humans, it's thought to be a hormone disruptor and linked to diabetes and heart disease.
We know enough about babies and children's exposure to hormone disruptors to know that we should be protecting them as much as possible.
So what's incredible about this is, we have some science behind it. The research has not been as extensive as it should have been prior to using this substance in our food. However, now that we know that this is happening, why is it that we're not doing anything about it? Why is the FDA not getting involved? I mean, this is a really big issue, and of course, the answer is always about the corporation.
Yes, it is.
And the corporations are not in favor of this.
That's right.
We're getting on Starbucks' case about using beetle
crushed up beetles for coloring, for red coloring in their strawberries. I know.
At the same time, we have 8-year-olds that are going through puberty because of BPA exposure.
Well, because it is correlated with BPA exposure. Now, we have to be very clear that there has not been a direct connection made. It shows a very, very strong linkage, but that's because the scientific evidence and the studies have not quite caught up with it. Mm-hmm. But in other countries, other countries like, Canada and the European Union, they've taken the precautionary principle. Even China, I believe, has done this. And they have taken BPA out of all of children's products, sippy cups, baby bottles, because it is when children are in the womb and also when they're at their youngest infant and toddler stage, their bodies are very small, and it is believed that BPA could have a more outsized effect for the dosage on them. And the FDA has been looking at this. They've been looking at this for a really, 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 really long time. And they have decided to not regulate BPA. And that is in part due to heavy lobbying by the chemical industry and the chemical manufacturers industry and the plastics industry. BPA is even found on the thermal receipts that you get at the grocery store.
BPA is everywhere. I remember.
Try not to touch that stuff. And if you have to, don't put it into recycling. I didn't know this until recently, but don't put your BPA receipts, covered receipts, into recycling to be recycled, because then it gets further into the paper supply. BPA does.
You know, Desi, sometimes I get so discouraged about our food supply, about what we're putting into our bodies, because I feel like every week there's a new story about what's in our meat, what kind of pesticides are used on our produce. What is there out, like what can we do to actually eat healthy without putting chemicals in our bodies, without putting antibiotics in our bodies, without putting BPA in our bodies?
Well, it's already happening, you know, with the advent of the internet, with shows like this where people are able to get that information out to each other. It's that peer-to-peer communication where you can go to great websites that you might not have had access to before. You can go to Mother Jones, you can go to grist.org, all of these sites that really will tell you what's going on outside of the corporate media that is sort of been captured by the private corporations that do all their advertising on them, so they want to protect their advertisers. But you can go to all these places and get that kind of information. You know,
but even when you get that information, I feel like even when you think you are protecting yourself from the antibiotics and the BPA, there's always something new. I think that's why people just kind of get tired of it and they give up. At least that's the way I feel. Like,
well, I'm sorry that I know, but it's very hard.
Yeah,
but,
it is hard. It's
unfortunately,
nearly impossible to avoid all these things.
But people are taking action. For example, here in the state of California, there's a major proposition that is on the ballot in November, and it is to allow voters to vote on whether or not they will get to have labels on foods that contain genetically modified organisms. Now, this was defeated in the Senate last, I think, 2 weeks ago. Bernie Sanders of Vermont had put forth an amendment to the Farm Bill saying consumers deserve to know what's in their food. That was defeated, but in California, for the first time, voters decide, not a legislature, not a state or federal agency gets to decide whether you get to know about this. Voters in California get to decide this, and generally what happens when something passes in California, it does tend to trickle out to other states. So people are taking action. Support those people who are taking action. You know, get more informed yourself. There are things you can do. Buying organic helps the organic industry survive, and when they survive, that actually helps to change the market itself and force the non-organic and the other processed food manufacturers to change their ways.